Welcome back to the third episode of this mini-series. In this episode, we will implement the inventory UI, so when we press a button, the inventory panel will appear. So stay tuned! First of all, we need to create a canvas, so right-click on UI and then click on Canvas. Okay, then modify the UI scale mode to scale with screen size and set the resolution to 1920 for the X and 1080 for the Y. Next, set the mesh slider to the center point at 0.5. At last, set its sort order to 10. Now we can create an empty game object in the canvas and name it Inventory. With the inventory selected, add a panel. Name it Background. Then resize it to your preferred size. Set the panel alpha value to 255 to make it fully opaque. And if you want, you can change the panel's color. Create an empty game object as a child of the background and name it Slots. This object will contain all inventory slots. Adjust the size of the slots game object to fit appropriately with the background. And next, attach a grid layout component to the slot game object to organize its children in a grid format. Right-click the slots game object, navigate to UI and select Image to add a new image. Rename this image to Slot, as it will serve as the parent object for each inventory slot. In the inspector, adjust the color of the slots to darker gray. Add an image as a child of the slot game object to serve as an icon, and resize it about 80% of the slot image size. Next, create a TextMeshBro text object to display the number of items in the slot. To do this, right-click the slot game object, select UI and choose Text. If prompt, import the TextMeshBro Essential. Position the text in bottom right corner of the slot, resize it accordingly, and set the alignment to right. Adjust the text color to black for better visibility. With the slot setup complete, duplicate it as many times as necessary. To adjust the layout, set the cell size to approximately 120 by 120 and the spacing to 20 by 20. Add some padding to the center of the slot within the game object and tweak this value to match your preference. Finally, let's add a title to the inventory, so player can easily recognize it when they open the menu. Right-click on the background panel, select UI and then choose Text. Move this text to the top of the panel and resize it as needed in the inspector so it fits nicely. Set the font color to black and the vertical alignment to center. Additionally, adjust the anchor to the top left. Great! UI visual setup is now complete. To make the inventory functional and display the items the players picked up, navigate to the script folder and inside the inventory folder, create a C# script called inventory UI. Open the script by double-clicking on it. In the update function, we will handle the player's input for opening and closing the inventory menu. First of all, we need a reference to the inventory panel. Let's declare a variable. It will be public and game object, which will name inventory panel. To capture the player's input for opening and closing the inventory, we will listen for key presses of the E button. We'll use an if statement to check if the key has been pressed. Specifically, we can use input.getKeyDown keycode.e to determine if the E key was pressed. If it returns true, we will instruct the inventory to open or close. First, let's create a function to handle the toggling of the inventory. Below the update function, create a new function of type void and name it the toggle inventory. Let's continue by setting up this new void method to turn the inventory panel on and off. Firstly, it needs to check the current state. Inside the toggle inventory function, we will use an if statement to check whether the inventory panel is current active or not. If it's inactive, inventory panel.activeSelf, we will turn it on. Secondly, it needs to toggle the panel. Depending on the panel state, we will use inventory panel.setActiveTrue to turn it on, or inventory panel.setActiveFalse to turn it off. Now it's time to test, so save the script and return to Unity. Attach it to the inventory game object on the canvas. In the inspector, you will see an empty slot for inventory panel. Drag the background panel, which holds the inventory UI, into this slot. Then we can test, so hit the play button and press EK for a few times to see the inventory panel toggle on and off with each key press. If everything is set up correctly, the inventory should appear and disappear as expected. Head back to our inventory UI script and scroll down to the toggle inventory function. We need to ensure that the UI accurately reflects the player's inventory each time the inventory panel is opened. To do this, you will need to create this setup function as a void type function below toggle inventory. We will check the inventory and update the UI as needed whenever the panel is opened. After turning on the inventory panel game object within the toggle inventory function, call a setup function to handle the UI updates. Before setting up the UI to display the player's inventory, we need to access the player inventory itself. To accomplish this, declare a new public variable of type character controller. This will allow us to link the player's inventory to our UI, enabling the UI to mirror the player's inventory accurately. Additionally, we will need to ensure we have the correct slots of the UI to match those in the player's inventory. Let's create and set up the slot UI script in Unity. First, create a new C# script called slot UI in the UI folder. This script will handle the setup of individual UI slots when items are added to the inventory. Open the slot UI script and then return to your inventory UI script. In the inventory UI script, add a new list slot UI called slots underneath the character controller variable. This list will keep track of all the UI slots. In the setup function of the inventory UI script, check if the number of slots in the UI matches the number of slots in the player's inventory. If they do, then we can proceed to set up our inventory. Let's add an if statement and check if slots.count is equal to the player.inventory.slots.count. In the if statement, we can use a for loop to loop through all the slots and set each one up. Create a for loop that loops through all our slots. In the for loop, we should check to see if the slot on the inventory is filled. We can check this by using an if statement to check if the player.inventory.slots.count type is not equal to collectible type dot none. If the type is not none, then we have an item in our inventory slot. We need to set up the slot in the UI. Before we can set up the UI with an icon image and a quantity, we need to get this information from somewhere. Let's have the item know what its icon is and have it pass the information to the inventory when it gets picked up. In the collectible script, add a new public sprite variable called icon to store the icon for each collectible item. Then, in the slot class within the inventory system, add a public sprite variable named icon to match the item's icon with the slot's visual representation in the UI. To handle setting the icon when adding an item to a slot, you will need to update the add item function to accept the entire collectible object rather than just its type. Delete the parameter of the add item function collectible type and rename the parameter to item for clarity. This will allow you to access the icon and other details directly from the collectible object. Finally, open your collectible script. You will see errors when calling the add function on the inventory because you're passing collectible type instead of a collectible object. Update is caused to pass the actual collectible object. In the slot UI script, you will need to add functionality to display item icons and quantities in the UI slots. Start by including the necessary namespace at the top of the script. Within the slot UI class, declare two public variables, one for UI image that will display the item icon and another time for the TextMesh Pro U UI that will show the quantity. Next, add a function called setItem that takes a parameter of type inventory.slot, which represents the slot information. In this function, set the icon image.sprite to the slot.icon. To ensure that the icon image is visible, you will set its color to fully opaque. This is necessary because the setEmpty function will later make the icon image transparent when the slot is empty. With this setup, the setItem function will properly display the item's icon and the quantity in the UI slot. To handle the scenario where a slot is empty, you will create a new public method in the slot UI script. This method will be responsible for clearing out the slot's content, make it appear empty. Start by adding a new public method called setEmpty. Since this method doesn't require any parameters, you can define it easily. In this method, setting the icon image sprite to null removes any image associated with the slot. To avoid displaying a default white square in Unity when no sprite is set, change the icon image to color to a fully transparent color, with RGB value to set to 1 and the alpha value set to 0. This makes the icon invisible. Finally, the quantity text.text is set to an empty string so that no text is displayed when the slot is empty. To complete this setup of the inventory UI script, go back to the function where you are looping through the slots and checking if each one contains an item. Inside the if statement, where you're checking if the slot is not empty, call the setItemOnSlot UI function, passing in the corresponding slot from the inventory. If the slot is empty, use the else statement to call slotUI.setEmpty. This ensures that each slot in the UI is later populated with an item or as empty, depending on the player's inventory. Now that the code is in place, head back to Unity to complete the setup. First, delete all the slots from the hierarchy except for one, which will serve as a template. Add the slot UI script to this slot and link the necessary components to the inspector. Drag the item icon image into the icon image slot and the quantity text into the quantity text box. With this slot fully set up, create a prefab from it. Prefabs allow you to make changes to the slot design or functionality in the future without having to manually update each slot individually. Once the prefab is created, you can duplicate the slot as many times as you needed to fill out your inventory grid. With everything set up in Unity, your inventory UI should now be functional and reflect the player's inventory accurately. To finalize the setup in Unity, start by selecting the inventory game object in the inspector. Lock the inspector. Next, highlight all the slots you created in the hierarchy and drag them into the slot list in the inspector. This will populate the list with all your slots in one go. Now select all the collectibles in your scene that the player can pick up and lock the inspector once more. Navigate to the sprites folder, find the seed sprite and drag it into the icon slot in the inspector for each collectible. Please assign the correct sprite to the corresponding collectible item. Remember to unlock the inspector after completing this step. Finally, return to the inventory game object. In the inspector, drag the player object from the hierarchy into the player slot. Please link the inventory UI to the player's inventory. Once everything is set up, hit play to test the functionality. Run into a seed pack to collect it. Then open your inventory. You should see the icon displayed in the inventory slot with a 1 in the lower right hand corner, indicating that you've collected one item. As you continue to collect seed, open your inventory again and the numbers will update to reflect the total amounts of potato seed you've gained. This confirms that the inventory system is functioning correctly, displaying both of the item icon and quantity as expected. This confirms that the inventory system is functioning correctly, displaying both of the item icon and the quantity as expected. So, in this video we created the inventory UI. I hope you liked it. See you soon, bye!